Welcome back to Klepper's Corner, Today in History, where we take one date, one trip around the sun, and somehow uncover enough human chaos to fill a semester-long seminar and at least 2 congressional investigations. Today, we crack open February 15th, a date so historically dense you could chop it up and serve it as a protein bar at a Silicon Valley conference. Because apparently, humanity saves all its big swings. Scientific breakthroughs, collapsing empires, and whatever the Armory show was doing to people's eyeballs for the dead center of February. Valentine's Day ends and boom, civilization either moves forward or face plants spectacularly. Let's get into it. Segment 1, the universe, math, and that time Galileo broke everyone's brain. February 15th is like the scientific equivalent of a triple espresso. It starts in 1564 with the birth of Galileo, the man who looked at the sky and said, hey, maybe instead of guessing, we try looking at stuff. A very controversial concept in a world where the official scientific method was whatever Aristotle muttered once. Galileo shows up, announces that math is the language of nature, and Europe collectively reacts like someone rebooted their operating system without asking permission. He points a telescope upward, discovers moons, phases, rings, and practically invents the idea of scientific receipts. The church, not loving the whole math over dogma thing, reminds him that questioning them is a great way to end up living that cozy home arrest lifestyle. Galileo becomes the first scientist grounded for being correct. Fast forward 382 years. February 15th, 1946. ENIAC is unveiled, the world's first programmable, electronic, general-purpose digital computer, the original giant brain. Except, unlike today's tech bros, ENIAC didn't pretend it was saving humanity. It was just here to calculate ballistics and quietly help invent the atomic age. And who made ENIAC run? Women. Brilliant women programmers physically moving switches and cables around like they were defusing bombs made of math. These women built the entire species of computers we now use to argue on Twitter. A legacy, truly. But February 15th isn't done flexing. In 1954, the French dived to over 13,000 feet in the FNRS-3, proving humans can go places our bodies are absolutely not designed for. The oceanic equivalent of hold my beer. Then, in 1997, astronauts Harbaugh and Tanner give the Hubble telescope a tune-up because even space telescopes need their annual oil change. They swap out sensors, replace recorders, and basically save the tool responsible for half the cool desktop wallpapers ever made. We keep accelerating. In 2001, the Human Genome Project publishes its draft. Scientists go, surprise, we only have like 30 to 40,000 genes, which is far fewer than expected. Imagine thinking humans were an IKEA warehouse and then finding out we're more like a mid-sized Home Depot with good lighting. And in 2024, scientists capture attosecond electron movement, basically a quantum flip book, proving that matter moves so fast our brains should just give up and watch cartoons instead. February 15th. It starts with Galileo and ends with people photographing electrons like tiny celebrity sightings. Growth. Segment 2, Empire, the rise, the fall, and the super awkward middle parts. February 15th also happens to be the day empires realize, oh no, someone unplugged us. We begin with George Rogers Clark in 1779, marching through freezing Indiana swamps to capture Fort Sackville. His men are cold, starving, and ankle-deep in a river that's basically giving them historical frostbite. But morale shoots up thanks to a kid floating on his drum like historically accurate comic relief. The modern U.S. owes part of its territory to one teenager who said, yeah, I can drum and not drown at the same time. Then, 1864 gives us an Indiana newspaper smashed by a mob for criticizing Lincoln. Because even in the 19th century, America looked at the First Amendment and said, cute idea, but what if chaos? By 1898, the USS Maine explodes in Havana Harbor. A tragedy immediately transformed into a marketing slogan that would make Don Draper weep. Remember the Maine, newspapers shout. To hell with Spain. America nods and says, war? Sure, we love collectibles. And suddenly, the U.S. becomes an imperial power with overseas territories, because nothing says nationhood like aggressively expanding your shipping lanes. But wait, the British Empire would like a word. On February 15, 1942, Singapore falls to Japan. Britain loses 85,000 troops to a force less than half its size. And suddenly, the empire that once bragged it never set the sun decides to set it voluntarily. This is the geopolitical equivalent of forgetting your password and locking yourself out of your own empire. And then, 1989, the Soviets withdraw from Afghanistan, a conflict so costly it basically hands Gorbachev a note reading, "You can't afford an empire anymore. Please pack your things." The power vacuum then bursts the Taliban and fuels the chaos leading to 9/11, a reminder that imperial exits age like milk left in a tank parked in the desert. February 15th doesn't just chronicle empire, it roasts them. Segment 3, Civil Rights, progress that takes 100 years, and then shows up late anyway. February 15th isn't just the birthday of Galileo, it's also the birthday of Susan B. Anthony, one of the only people in U.S. history who can organize a national movement without the help of Twitter trolls. She championed women's rights long before it was cool, or legal, or remotely safe. Without her, American democracy would still be a men-only poker night. But the real heartbreak of February 15th comes from 1848. Sarah Roberts, just 5 years old, denied entry to a Boston school because she was black. Her father sues. Robert Morris and Charles Sumner argue the case brilliantly, and the court says, nah, inventing the legal concept of separate but equal, a phrase so historically cursed it should come with a warning label. This ruling sets the stage for Plessy versus Ferguson, Jim Crow, and a century of segregation. It's the butterfly effect, if the butterfly were a racist judge with terrible jurisprudence. Yet the grassroots fight continues. Massachusetts banned segregation in 1855. Women earned the right to argue cases in front of the Supreme Court in 1879. In 1921, a massive marble monument of suffragists is unveiled in the Capitol and then shoved into the basement because apparently Congress said, we're pro-women, but don't get comfortable. It doesn't return upstairs until 1997. The statue had a longer wait time than a passport renewal office run by sloths. And in 1968, Henry Lewis becomes the first African-American conductor of a major symphony orchestra, proving classical music can, in fact, contain rhythm. Civil rights on February 15th. One step forward, several legal opinions backward, eventually forward again. Segment 4, Art, Culture, and National Identity. Now with 100% more confusion. 1913, the Armory Show opens and immediately gives New Yorkers an existential crisis. People walk in expecting pretty portraits and instead find Picasso slicing dimensions, Duchamp creating staircases that move like fever dreams, and Matisse painting nudes so blue the Smurfs claim copyright. Critics call it Bedlam in Art, which honestly sounds like an exhibit title MoMA would use today. But the shock breaks open American art, shifts cultural power to New York, and proves wealthy women with checkbooks can change the world faster than Congress. Then, in 1950, Disney releases Cinderella, saving the studio from bankruptcy. Without this movie, Disney might have gone bankrupt, and we'd all be living in a world where the only thing in Florida shaped like a castle is Mar-a-Lago. Cinderella becomes a cultural touchstone, influencing fashion, animation, consumerism, and possibly the entire wedding industrial complex, which owes Cinderella billions at this point. Then, 1965 gives us the Canadian maple leaf flag. Canada finally decides, hey, maybe a flag shouldn't look like Britain's Laundry Day. They debut the now iconic red and white design, a simple leaf, 2 stripes, and the strong message, we're friendly, but don't test us. February 15th becomes National Flag of Canada Day, A polite celebration, but a celebration nonetheless. This segment of February 15th is about aesthetics. Art that shocks you, animation that saves empires of commerce, and flags that declare independence without shouting. Segment 5, global protests, falling space rocks, and other modern ways to panic. February 15th, 2003, the largest coordinated protest in human history. Up to 30 million people across 60 countries stand up and say, hey, maybe invading Iraq is a bad idea. Governments say, love your energy, but we're doing it anyway. And history later responds, yeah, the protesters were right. This becomes the prototype for internet-enabled activism. Humans discovering they can shout together across time zones and occasionally be correct. But February 15th isn't all activism and empowerment. Sometimes the universe gets involved. 2013. An asteroid explodes over Chelyabinsk, Russia, unleashing a shockwave equivalent to hundreds of kilotons of TNT. Windows shatter, buildings shake, and astronomers go, good news, this wasn't the big asteroid we were watching today. Comforting. Then, in 2010, Belgium has a deadly train collision. In Honduras, a prison fire kills hundreds. Indianapolis breaks snow records. February 15th is basically nature and infrastructure teaming up to say, don't get cocky, humans. But we also get progress. In 2021, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala becomes the first woman and first African to lead the WTO. And in 2024, Greece becomes the first Orthodox Christian nation to legalize same-sex marriage and adoption. A reminder that sometimes history moves the needle not with explosions, but with compassion. February 15th, humanity protests, panics, celebrates, legislates, breaks things, fixes things, and occasionally gets hit by pieces of space. The full spectrum. In conclusion, February 15th is the historical equivalent of a dense fruitcake. Heavy, complicated, usually surprising, occasionally explosive, and somehow still around year after year. It gives us Galileo defying orthodoxy, empires stretching and snapping, civil rights crawling toward justice, art rewriting the rules, nations rewriting their identities, and millions shouting across continents for peace, all while asteroids take cheap shots at Earth. If history is a mosaic, February 15th is the tile where someone spilled the entire box. And somehow, everything still fits. And that's Today in History. Join me next time on Klepper's Corner, where we'll pick another date, analyze another avalanche of human nonsense, and see if civilization learned anything. Spoiler, mixed results.